Hello, everybody. Hi, my dear friends. This is Janice Masters, the Shaman Mama from janicemasters.com. And we're here together to do a Facebook Live about a really important topic, especially if you are sensitive and empathic. The topic today is give yourself a minute, the natural cycle of recovering from stress. Hi, Joan. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. Again, especially if you're sensitive and empathic, I'm going to preface this whole presentation by saying that in our culture, we're definitely not encouraged to take a minute to recover from anything, really. It's push, 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 go, 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 achieve, 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 accomplish, 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 and ignore the voice of your inner prompts from your soul. Not a good way to go through life for anybody, but especially for a sensitive empath. So we're going to talk about how important it is to really tune into that inner knowing, and perhaps some of the information I'll share with you today will even augment that knowing, because we sort of don't have this embedded in messages from the culture that we get to take a minute. So we're talking about recovering from all kinds of stressors, from little tiny ones like you stub your toe, or the cashier at the grocery store is kind of cranky with you, to divorce, illness, injury, financial difficulties, a kid in trouble, caring for aging parents, all kinds of things that stress us. And again, they can be from small to huge. So we're gonna look at a process, a natural cycle, if you will, that can be applied and honored for any kind of stress. Cycle might be over within 5 minutes. Cycle might take 6 months to a year to complete itself. Okay? So there is a very natural rhythm. And if we learn to respect it, to tune into it and respect it, our health will improve, our peace of mind will improve, we'll go through life much easier, and we will actually be evolving into more of who we came here to be. So we're looking at, and by the way, I wrote a blog post about this a number of years ago, and it's been one of my more popular ones. So I'm going to post it after this broadcast. I'll post the link to it in the comments. So we're looking at these steps in the process. First comes the stress. Then comes what I've called the slowdown. Hi, Susan. I'm so glad you're here. Glad you're listening. So the second part of it is the slowdown. And then the third part of it is the shift. Now, every one of these occurs naturally. The shift, the slowdown, the stress, the slowdown, and the shift. Usually what happens is that we want to hurry our way through. And in particular, we get really impatient with the slowdown. We're not used to, again, and I am blaming it on the culture. In this culture, we are not encouraged to take a minute. We're not encouraged to sit down and allow things to unfold. Excuse me. So when the stress hits, we're in pain, we're suffering, to one degree or another. Put it on a scale from 1 to 100, The clerk at the grocery store is a little rude to you, that's probably a 2, But your significant other announces that he or she wants a divorce, that's 100. I mean, if we look at those stress scales that the researchers have created, that's a big stress. Moving house is another big stress. Illness or injury is another big stress. So you have a heart attack, or a loved one has a heart attack, or a loved one dies, or you're caring for an elderly parent and that's ongoing and then they pass away, or you've got a kid who reaches adolescence and suddenly they're in trouble. Okay, all of these are big stressors, and there's a whole bunch in between, like along the gamut of financial struggles. It could be a little struggle, it could be a medium struggle, it could be a big struggle. Perhaps you needing to change jobs or careers. So those are the stresses that we're looking at. What happens after the stress is very natural. And if we tune into our bodies and our souls, we will get that it's really natural to slow down. That's why I call it the slowdown. There is no amount of pushing or pulling that is going to be healthy for anybody who is in a natural slowdown. It would require really kind of ripping your soul out by its roots, throwing it in the corner and saying, I really don't care what you want, I'm going to push through this. Not a good thing. The slowdown happens for a very good reason. Again, in the culture, we do not give people permission to recognize loss and to grieve. And again, these exist along a continuum as well. Everything from a little loss to a big loss, which means little grief to big grief. Takes a little bit of time, takes a lot of time. And the truth of the matter probably is that in one way or another, we're all processing grief as we go along through our lives, because there are losses every day in every way, teeny ones, little ones, bigger ones, huge ones. Nobody's immune. So the slowdown is the natural part of the cycle that allows us to take a breath, give ourselves permission to take a minute, and to allow recovery to happen. Now, recovery is not something you can insist upon. You can't lay a timetable on it, although heaven knows ego will try to do that. Okay? We have to allow, well, we don't have to, but I'm encouraging you to allow the slowdown to evolve naturally. After my mother passed away, my slowdown consisted in me doing a lot of sitting. I did some reading, but I did a lot of sitting. I watched some television. I sat out on the swing. I wasn't able to work out in my usual way. I wasn't terribly interested in things that had interested me before. Grief. Okay, this is grief. And so it takes time. Smaller stressors are going to take less time. But the important thing is to recognize that there is a flow and to trust that flow, to trust, this is so ingrained in us that I wrote a poem about this when I went through divorce over 35 years ago. We're afraid that we won't get started again. We're afraid that we'll be stuck in the doldrums forever. Joan says, I had an aha after our recent getaway vacation. We didn't allow ourselves a slowdown after that. Even happy, upbeat events cause stress. Absolutely. Any change causes stress. And you're absolutely right, even if it's a happy change. If it's a negative change, an unhappy change, or a happy change, it causes stress. If we can think about stress equals change. So when we change, there needs to be a period of adaptation. And again, and I reiterate this over and over again, especially if we are sensitive and empathic. We need that. Okay, so the slowdown is a very natural part of the cycle that will take you through the process of recovery if you allow it to. Now, believe me, I may have sat and honored the grief after my mother's death, but I'm telling you, plenty of people don't honor that. Plenty of people just push through, act like, okay, suck it up. I know what happened, but I got to act like nothing happened. And that brings me to another point, which is kind of peripheral, but part of the same thing, which is that we don't tell the truth about how we're doing. There's a wonderful video that I shared the other day by a young woman who basically was being very radical by saying, you know what, it's time to tell the truth. If somebody asks me how I'm doing and I'm in a horrible state, but I say that I'm fine, they have every right to assume that I'm fine. So if I really want support and I want compassion, then I better freaking well tell the truth about how I'm doing. So if we tell the truth to ourselves about how we're doing, then we have a better shot at allowing the slowdown. Slowdown can take 5 minutes or it can take a year. It all depends on what the stress was. Now here's the really cool piece of this, is that if you allow the slowdown, the shift at the end of that cycle is going to occur naturally. Now, I've been as guilty of this as anybody, trying in the midst of the slowdown, not before I recognized what this cycle was, I would try to, enforce a shift. Okay, well, I have to start this new program, or I have to get another new client, or I have to go back to working out. Whenever we try to push our souls that way, we're going to meet resistance. And then we're going to be suffering even more. So the trick to all of this whole cycle thing, is trusting that the slowdown has a natural trajectory. It starts, it goes along, it keeps on going, then it begins to diminish and it ends. And the minute that it ends, an energetic shift happens. Perhaps you become aware of something. Perhaps you wake up one morning and you realize, oh, wow, I'm feeling lighter. Or perhaps you're ready now to talk to a friend on the phone. Or maybe you're ready to start a new project in your work. Maybe you're ready to start working out again, or whatever it is. But there's a point at which that cycle becomes very natural. Joan says, as Matt Kahn speaks to, on planet Earth, our bodies are the boss. Yeah, that's really true. I love that, because that echoes what I've been feeling for a number of years about what I refer to as my body guru. I like to say that I sit at her feet and learn, but the fact is, I resist that a whole lot of the time. Because from the eyebrows up, we think we know it all. And we think we know how things are and how they should be and how it's going to go down. And we don't respect that natural rhythm of the body. Matt is a wise one, bringing through some really, really cool wisdom. Thank you, Joan. So we've got the stress, and we know what that is. Then we've got the slowdown, which is really the challenging piece of this cycle, to respect and allow the slowdown to take as long as it needs to take, trusting that at the end of it, there will be a very natural shift into the next thing. And you will always be pleased at what the shift is. It might be that a new job appears on the horizon. It may be that a new source of income comes into your life. It may be that somebody who's potentially a new relationship shows up. It may be that you've recovered from surgery and now you're feeling like yourself again. Okay, there's everybody recognizes that moment when you wake up in the morning, or I can give you a perfect example of this. Many years ago, when I was in my mid-20s, I was suffering terribly from anxiety attacks, panic attacks. I mean, they were horrible. The kind where you feel it rising up in your gut and you think, okay, well, this is it. I'm going to either die or disappear. Okay? So a friend of mine convinced me to go with him to learn transcendental meditation. And so I learned TM, and I began to practice twice a day, just like they taught me. And after 8 weeks of transcendental meditation, I was sitting on my front stoop of my little townhouse in Virginia, and I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, I'm back. This is me. And furthermore, I haven't had a panic attack in a couple of weeks. So it was one of those aha moments. And the rest of that story is I never had another panic attack again. Now, TM doesn't work that way for everybody, but that was the shift that was ready to happen for me. And that was that moment of recognition for me when I realized that the shift had happened. Okay? I didn't strong arm it into place. Far from it. I mean, meditation is really about surrender. And the best thing we can do in the slowdown is to surrender. So, I don't know if there's any more to say about this. I'm going to post the link to my blog post in the comments when I'm finished with this Facebook Live. Does anybody have any questions about this or an aha that came up for you as we talk about this? The stress, the slowdown, the shift. That's the natural cycle. And allowing the natural cycle is a gift we can give to yourself. Do you do TM in the middle of the panic or before or after? No, I wouldn't do TM relative to the panic attacks. I would do TM as it was prescribed, which is get up in the morning, wash your face, brush your teeth, sit down and meditate. And then in the late afternoon before dinner time, wash your face, sit down, meditate. So the instructions were to do it before you put food in your stomach, and before you were going to engage in any kind of vigorous activity. And I didn't even, it's funny, I didn't start TM because I hoped that it would stop the panic attacks. I really didn't have an agenda for it, except that I had let go of the Catholic religion that I had been raised with, and I had been reading a ton of Eastern religion and philosophy, and the process of meditation really intrigued me. And they talked about the research that was just beginning in those days about lowering blood pressure and all kinds of other good health benefits. And my friend Kevin was really into it, and so I did it. And again, I really didn't have an agenda for it. It was a total surprise to me that the panic attacks stopped after 8 weeks of practicing transcendental meditation. So, anybody else have a question? Okay. So if not, this is I think the first time that I've done a Facebook Live on my business page, the Shaman Mama, and so I didn't expect a lot of people to show up. I'm really thrilled that you, Joan, and Susan showed up, and I'll be doing these on Tuesdays and Thursdays at noon Eastern, and Joan and I talked earlier, and I think the next one I'm going to do next Tuesday, October 3rd, will be about sacred self-care as relates to people-pleasing and setting boundaries and limits. That's a really juicy one for a lot of us. So thank you, my dear friends, for being here and supporting me. I love teaching this way, and I'll see you around. Love you very much. Have a blessed day. This is Janice Masters, the Shaman Mama, from janicemasters.com. Thank you.